Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. We are on hadith number 102. Babu ma yustahabbu lil alimi idha su'ila ayyun nasi a'lam. The chapter about what a learned person should respond if they are asked who's the most knowledgeable person. All right, so somebody comes to me and asks me who's the most knowledgeable person, what is the proper response? Right? Now, is there somebody who is the most knowledgeable person in Islam at any given time or any given place? Obviously, yeah. I mean, there's somebody who is the most knowledgeable in SoCal. There's somebody who's the most knowledgeable globally. There's somebody who's most knowledgeable in the Middle East, South Asia, whatever it is. There is someone. But what should the response be? عن أبي بن كعب رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال قام موسى النبي خطيبا في بني إسرائيل فسئل أي الناس أعلم فقال أنا أعلم فعتب الله عليه إذ لم يرد العلم إلى الله فأوحى الله إليه أن عبدا من عبادي بمجمع البحرين هو أعلم منك. So here the Prophet ﷺ says that once Musa ﷺ stood up and he was addressing his community, and somebody asked who is the most knowledgeable person. All right, now I have a rant here that I don't know if I want to get into. I just find it very suspicious that somebody would ask Musa alayhi salam who's the most knowledgeable person. Like, why wouldn't they just assume it's him? Why wouldn't it be him?
They don't want to follow him.
Right? So the question seems like an innocent question, but when you really think about it, it's not innocent.
It's like us.
It's like, who?
You asking?
No, it's okay. I'm not Musa alayhi salam. I'm not a prophet. Right? I'm not a prophet. I'm just another person. We're talking about a messenger of Allah. And when was he asked this? After the fall of Fir'aun. I mean, like, what was this person's goal? Like, what was he trying to do? This is what's coming in my mind. So, you know this, it's pretty obvious, but not everyone who asks you a question, that question is coming from an innocent place. There's always the gotcha questions, right? There's always people who are trying to get you to dig a hole by the question that they asked, right? And they do this in politics a lot, hoping that the one being asked responds in a way that is going to get them in trouble. And it happens a lot, right? Anyway, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet says, فَعَتَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was displeased with Musa's response. Because Musa said, I am the most knowledgeable. Right? He said, I'm the most knowledgeable. Why wouldn't he say that? In the end, he's of ulul azmi min al-rusul. He is of the strong-willed prophets. Right? Why would he even suspect that there's somebody more knowledgeable than him? Right? He's Musa alayhi salam, who's been given the Torah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to show Musa that his answer wasn't the best way to answer. Why? Because he didn't take his answer back to Allah. Meaning, in other words, he should have said, Allah knows best who's the most knowledgeable. So if anybody is asked, who's the most knowledgeable? Right? Then they should say, Allahu A'lam, who's the most knowledgeable. Now, if you were to ask me, who's the most knowledgeable person in SoCal, I might feel that so-and-so is the most knowledgeable, but even then, you never really know. Right? This is one of the challenges of knowledge, that people find that, okay, well, how do I know I can trust this person's knowledge? How do I know that this person, when I ask them, they're giving me correct knowledge? Right? Maybe there's an ill intent, or maybe they gave you the wrong answer. Unintentionally, right? With the best of intentions, but they just gave you the wrong answer. So the proper way of addressing this is saying, Allahu A'lam, who's the most knowledgeable, but I recommend you ask so-and-so. Right? So if somebody comes to me and they say, who's the most knowledgeable person? Like, I have an inquiry. I need to ask somebody, but I want to make sure I'm getting the most authentic information. They ask me, who's the most knowledgeable? My response should be, Allahu A'lam. And if I want to direct them to someone, I should say, but you should consider so-and-so. Go and ask so-and-so, because I think they have a decent amount of knowledge. Right? And the same holds true when it comes to Iman. Who has strong iman? Who is a good believer? Allahu A'lam. Right? The Prophet ﷺ teaches us that if you want to praise somebody, you want to speak well of somebody in terms of their iman, then say, أحسبه ذلك والله حسيبه. I think this person has strong iman and Allah knows best. Or to say, ولا أزكي أحدا على الله. I think so and so is a wali of Allah, but Allah knows best the person's iman. Because you can never really know. Right? You can never really know. So this is the way we go about doing it, and this is the appropriate way of doing it. This is knowledge only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So in respect to Allah, we return that knowledge to Him. Allah knows best. Anyway, this is a long hadith, by the way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa that there is a servant of my servants who's at the corner of two bodies of water, two seas, who is more knowledgeable than you. Right? We're now talking about the story of Musa and Khadr, which is known in Surah Al-Kahf. And these elements are also mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. Where is the meeting of the two oceans or the two bodies of water? Probably somewhere in the Sinai Peninsula. So if you can, I don't know how your geography is, I don't have a picture to show you, but if you know the peninsula of Sinai, it goes down like this. Like if there's a tip at the southernmost point, and there are two bodies of water that meet, right? I forgot the exact where they meet at the Red Sea, right? But I forgot the two names of those bodies. What is it? Okay, so I don't know if they are in English, but there's two small bodies of water that meet, and then it becomes the Red Sea. That's one possibility there. Another opinion that I saw, which I think is a little bit far-fetched, is that it's in what's now Sudan, where two branches of the Nile River meet. Right? So the Nile River, it branches out sometimes, where there's an area where the branches of the Nile River meet. So some said this, but I don't know why it would be there. It'd probably be somewhere, as I mentioned, in the Sinai Peninsula. Wallahu ta'ala alam, it doesn't really matter. And we know it's Khadr, as the hadith mentions, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls him abdan min ibadi. And that's the same phrase Allah uses in the Quran. فَوَجْدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Musa met up with a servant from the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is he a prophet or not? We don't have anything clear cut that says that he is a prophet. So the scholars differ. Some who say no, he's not a prophet, and some who say that he is a prophet. My personal opinion is that he is a prophet. Why? Because when you look at what he did and the information that he had, knowledge of the unknown, the unseen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he does not reveal the unseen except to some prophets. Right? That's one. Number two, I highly doubt, in fact, I don't see it plausible that somebody kills a child except that it is a direct command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not right. Ibrahim alayhi salam did not have the authority to sacrifice his son simply by seeing a dream. Right? If any one of us were to see a dream where they're slaughtering their son, right, sacrificing their child, that dream has no meaning. You don't do it. Why? Because it's haram to do that. Okay, why did Ibrahim attempt to do it? Because Allah told him. Right? So it just seems very strange that this man would go and do these things and not be a prophet. Right? So Allah ta'ala alam, I'm pretty confident that he is a prophet. And how can a non-prophet have a quality that surpasses a prophet? It doesn't make sense. Right? So these are three evidences that I have. Again, there is a difference of opinion among scholars. Allah ta'ala alam. Right. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling Musa that this man is more knowledgeable than him. The scholars clarified that Khadr was more knowledgeable than Musa in a particular area, not overall. How could he be? When Musa was given the Torah, when Musa was given miracles, when Musa was sent to Fir'aun, All these surpass Khadr and what Khadr did, right? So what seems to be meant by the statement that he is more knowledgeable, he is more knowledgeable about unseen affairs. Allah gave Khadr more knowledge in terms of future events and future possibilities than what Musa had. But in terms of knowledge of the Sharia, knowledge of Allah, right, the rights of Allah, knowledge in terms of the ibadat, clearly Musa had more. And remember, Musa is of ulul azmi min al-rusul. He is of the strong-willed messengers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us by name. He lists by name. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Ibrahim, Nuh, Musa, and Isa. Khadr is not there. In fact, the name of Khadr isn't even mentioned in the Quran. So how can we say that Khadr is better than Musa alayhi salam or more knowledgeable than Musa alayhi salam when his name is even mentioned in the Quran, whereas Musa's name is mentioned the most, and his story is mentioned the most, right? So clearly Musa is overall more knowledgeable than Khadr, and clearly, without doubt, has higher status with Allah than Khadr, even though both are prophets. So Musa alayhi salam, continuing the hadith, قال يا ربي وكيف به فقيل له احمل حوتا في مكتل فإذا فقدته فهو ثم فانطلق وانطلق بفتاه يوشع بن نون وحمل حوتا في مكتل حتى كان عند الصخرة وضع رؤوسهما فنام فانسل الحوت من المكتل فاتخذ سبيله في البحر سربا وكان موسى وفتاه عجبا. So here, Musa alayhi salam asks Allah, okay, how can I meet this individual? So notice Musa alayhi salam's response. He wasn't taken back, like, oh my God, how can somebody be more knowledgeable? He wasn't offended by the fact that there's somebody who actually surpasses him in a certain area. Rather, he found that as an opportunity, right? He didn't just take the moment and say, okay, Allah, next time I will say Allah knows best, who is most knowledgeable. He said, no, I want to meet this individual, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, take a hoot. Now today, in modern Arabic, hoot is a whale. But in classical Arabic, hoot is a fish. Anything that swims in the sea is a hoot, right? So take a fish and put it in a certain vessel. If you lose it, then that's the spot where you'll find Khadr, right? So he and his disciple Yusha bin Nun, who would become the next prophet after Musa and Harun, go and they have a fish with them, and so they reach a point where they get tired, right? They get tired, so they sleep, and while they are sleeping, the fish goes. The fish somehow leaves the vessel and gets back into the ocean or the sea. Yusha catches glimpse of this. He sees what's going on. He sees what happened. But when they woke up, Yusha forgets to tell Musa alayhi salam that this happened. Right? So they went to sleep, they wake up, Yusha saw the fish leave in a very strange way, but forgets to tell Musa, so they go and they continue. فانطلقا بقية ليلتهما ويومهما فلما أصبح قال موسى لفتاه آتنا غداءنا لقد لقينا من سفرنا هذا نصبا. So they continue traveling for a day and a night, for 24 hours. And then they get tired, and Musa says to Yusha, let's eat the fish, right? We're hungry, we're tired now. ولم يجد موسى مسا من النصب حتى جاوز المكان الذي أمر به. What's interesting, as this hadith points out, is that they didn't feel any fatigue while traveling except when they passed the point where they were supposed to be. Okay? So that's why he says, Musa, to Yusha, we're hungry, we're tired. And the Quran documents this as well. And the scholars point to something interesting here. They say it's very interesting that he only felt fatigue after he passed the place where Allah commanded him to be. And the scholar said that when a person's sincerity becomes weak, or their intention changes to becoming insincere, or they're doing that which Allah didn't command them, they become tired. To put differently, so long as a person does what Allah commands them and does it sincerely for the sake of Allah, they'll find tawfiq. They'll find that Allah is assisting them and helping them in what they are doing, and they'll find ease in what they are doing, even though what they're doing might be very burdensome, right? But when the intention changes, it becomes insincere, or when they are doing what Allah did not command them, then they lose that tawfiq, right? It doesn't have to be in a negative way, like they're doing something haram. Clearly, Musa and Yusha aren't doing anything haram, but the idea is they passed the place where Allah commanded them to go. So perhaps, sometimes, fatigue can be the result, or can be a message from Allah that, hey, pause and check yourself, right? Pause and check yourself. Now, don't over-exaggerate this. If you are working day in, day out, naturally you're going to feel fatigued. If you're not eating well and hydrating yourself, obviously you're going to feel fatigue, right? I'm not saying every time you feel fatigue, it's because there's something you're doing that's gone off course, right? But perhaps sometimes, from a spiritual perspective, this can be the case, right? فقال له فتاه أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة فإني نسيت الحوت قال موسى ذلك ما كنا نبغي فارتد على آثارهما قصصا. So there Yusha remembers, this happened, and in the Quran, not mentioned here, but in the Quran, Yusha says وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره. And the shaitan caused me to forget, right? So sometimes your forgetfulness can be the result of the shaitan distracting you, right? Somebody forgot to pray, or the shaitan distracted you. Now, you're excused by the Sharia. The Sharia excuses your mistakes as a result of forgetfulness, right? Or your mistakes as a result of, I didn't mean that. Sometimes it happens, right? But the idea is, one of the games the shaitan plays with the human being is to try to make them forget. Forget about Allah, forget about remembering Allah, forget about salah, forget about righteous deeds. How? By distracting them with the world, making them worried about worldly affairs and all of this. And one of the practices is, if you forget something, to try and return what you forgot by remembering Allah, right? وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. Also in Surah Al-Kahf. If you forget something, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in the Arab world, I don't know how it is in the South Asian or Central Asia or wherever, but in the Arab world, the habit is when someone forgets something, what do they say? Allahumma salli ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Right? That's fine, because although it is salutations for the Prophet ﷺ, it's still a form of dhikr, remembrance. But perhaps, maybe, what's better is to say something like La ilaha illallah or Subhanallah or Allahu Akbar. In Salah, when the Imam forgets, what are men supposed to say? Subhanallah, right? To remind the Imam. Anyway, so when they realized that the fish went or left at a certain point, they go back to that point. فلما انتهيا إلى الصخرة إذا رجل مسجى بثوب أو قال تسجى بثوبه فسلم موسى فقال الخضر وأن بأرضك السلام. So they go back to the same rock that they slept on, and they find a man there. So it's a qadr of Allah, right? Subhanallah, the qadr of Allah that, when they first went there, Khadr wasn't there, and this happened. Perhaps the wisdom is for us to get a few extra lessons out of this story. So Musa alayhi salam tells this man, Assalamu alaikum, and Khadr responds and says, people in this part of the world don't say salam. So he finds it strange, right? He's like, who's this person? فقال أنا موسى قال موسى بني إسرائيل. So Musa says, I'm Musa, and Khadr responds, Musa of the children of Israel. قال نعم. قال هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. So Musa says, can I follow you to learn from you that which will give me rushd. Notice something here. I don't remember if you attended the tafsir of the stories of Surah Al-Kahf, I mentioned this. But notice what the wording of Musa alayhi salam. He said, can I follow you to learn what will give me rushd? Right? What is rushd? Rushd is not simply correct information. It is knowledge that will help you make the right decisions, do the right thing. So Musa alayhi salam is showing us, or through this statement, we're learning the function of knowledge. Why seek knowledge? So that you make better decisions, so that you know what to do. Knowledge is meant to translate into action. Knowledge that has no action, what worth is it? Right? And it doesn't have to be physical action, it could be action of the heart as well. So obviously learning a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't necessarily translate into a certain action, but it will translate into an action of the heart. The more I know Allah, the more I can depend on Allah, the more I trust Allah, the more I love Allah, the more I'll have patience for the sake of Allah. It's still an action, right? But the idea is, the purpose of knowledge is to be action-based, to help you make better decisions, to help you do the right thing. And that's what we should see knowledge as, rushd. And the Prophet ﷺ was approached by a mushrik who scolded the Prophet ﷺ for what he was doing. He said, you came here, everything was good before you came. We were all one heart, one people. When you came, you divided us, and. So he goes on a rant. And the Prophet ﷺ is sitting quiet, and he let, I believe the companion's name is Imran bin Husayn. So he let Imran finish, and he said, Imran, are you done? He said, yes. He said, Imran, how many gods do you worship? He said, I worship 7 on the earth and one in the heavens. Something like that. And he said, Imran, when you're in a truly difficult situation, who do you reach out to? He said, the one in the sky. So Imran, the Prophet says, Imran, accept Islam and I'll teach you a dua. So Imran says, okay, I accept Islam. He becomes a believer. Look how it changes. And the dua was, Allahumma alhimni rushdi wa qini sharra nafsi. Oh Allah, inspire me my rushd. Meaning, give me the ability to make the correct decisions. Right? We'll send it, inshallah. And the second part, waqini sharra nafsi, and protect me from the evils of myself. Right? Very beautiful dua, very beautiful. And this is a dua we should often say. Right? In fact, I say this dua before every khutbah I give, and almost every talk that I give. All right? So, inshallah. Right? So the idea is, I could say something really dumb. I could, unintentionally. So I had to make this dua, well, Allah, protect me from myself and my own, nonsense.
So what else you want to tell us?
What else I'm not telling you? We'll just have to wait and see. Yeah, hadith. Right? قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. So Khadr said to Musa, yeah, it's not going to work out because you're just too impatient. Right? See, that's yeah, that could be it, right? Because Allah's telling him this is what's going to happen, the future things. But it can also be that prophets are fantastic leaders because they know how to read people. They know how to read people, right? You look at the prophets, Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, it's truly incredible that anybody who would talk to him, no matter how short the talk or how long the talk, anyone, it could be his closest friend or his biggest enemy, one thing that was consistent is that they would never leave hating the Prophet more. Nor would they ever leave in a worse situation, ever. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible, right? Not only that, anyone the Prophet ﷺ saw, the Prophet knew what that person's strengths and weaknesses are and advised them accordingly. That's how he was. Now, could it be that Jibreel or Wahy is coming to him and guiding him? Maybe, but not necessarily. He just had the ability. Allah gave him the ability to read the personalities of people as though it's written, on them. Khadr could be the same thing. This is a man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been given knowledge of the unseen, what happens, how people behave. So he took a look at Musa alayhi salam. He understood Musa is this big guy, right? And he has a certain demeanor. And Khadr said, man, you're the type that you're too impatient. But what was the source of his impatience? Wanting everything to be correct and good. Like, he doesn't have the patience to see something wrong and figure out what's going. No, he's going to intervene immediately, right? Like what he did when that person from the children of Israel was being bullied by the guard, right? He intervened immediately, twice, right? That's just his personality. And Khadr, he knows, man, I'm about to take you on a journey. You're asking to go on a journey where things that are incorrect to the human mind, to human law, to human behavior is going to happen, and I'm the one who's going to be doing it. I'm the one who's going to be causing it. إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. You can't be patient. I know you, Musa. يا موسى إني على علم من علم الله علمنيه لا تعلمه أنت وأنت على علم علمكه الله لا أعلمه قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا. Khadr tells Musa, I have knowledge Allah has given me, He hasn't given you. And you have knowledge Allah gave you, He hasn't given me. Right? So we're in a whole different ball game here. So Musa says, you will find me patient and I'm not going to disobey you. Just tell me and you're going to find me obedient. Okay, فانطلقا يمشيان على ساحل البحر ليس لهما سفينة فمرت بهما سفينة فكلموه أن يحملوهما فعرف الخضر فحملوهما بغير نول فجاء عصفور فوقع على حرف السفينة فنقر نقرة أو نقرتين من البحر فقال الخضر يا موسى ما نقص علمي وعلمك من علم الله إلا كنقرة هذا العصفور في البحر. So they go and they're walking on the shoreline, right? What a nice journey. Right? And they're waiting there and they don't have a ship of their own. They wait for a ship. So it seems like maybe there's a port, ships go, they pick up people, drop off people, whatever it is. So a ship comes and the captain knows Khadr. So they didn't ask Khadr for any money. Welcome. So they're on this ship and a small bird comes and it's on the ledge of the boat and the bird drinks a little bit of water. And Khadr tells Musa, Khadr, my knowledge and your knowledge in comparison to Allah's knowledge does not scale to the drop of water that this bird drank in comparison to the ocean, right? Now, take your minds out of the globe, like the geography we know, because some person is going to come and say, okay, we can make a ratio, a drop in comparison to the Red Sea is... No, that's not what's going on. If you are in the ocean and you don't know geography, back in the day, you don't have a map. Like, you don't know where you're going. Like, you don't know where this ends. The ocean it's endless. You are just waters everywhere with no end in sight. So our knowledge in comparison to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is none. There is no comparison. But what we can do is begin to appreciate certain elements that Allah knows and we clearly don't know. Such as future effects. Like, what is the domino effect of an action? They make movies out of this. Like, what happens if a butterfly 100 million years ago died before it actually died? What kind of a chain effect would this cause? And they make movies out of this, right? The idea is one event cascades into a series of other events, right? And had that event changed just a little bit, over the course of centuries, it can have a very, very big effect, right? I'll give you one example. In 1942, right? In 1942, I believe it's that year, the Sultan of the Ottomans and the Grand Mufti of the Ottomans, gave a fatwa that it is haram to use the printing press of Europe. 1942. Now, if you're in 1942, Europe is in the Dark Ages. They are so backwards that it's laughable. The Ottomans they have control of the world. When the Ottomans were there, the saying was, there's not a single Christian piece of wood in the Mediterranean Sea. That means they control the world, right? And they gave this fatwa. Do you think that they ever considered what is the long-term effect of this? No, obviously not. Why would they? I mean, it's Europe. No, it's just the printing press. But looking at it 500 years later, what a dumb fatwa, right? And we know the ramifications. Well, the printing press was one of the primary factors in allowing Europe to get out of the Dark Ages and get into the Renaissance. It just one cascades, right? And so Allah knows this. He knows every single scenario. Had it played out like this, what would be the case? Had it played out like that, what would be the case? Had all of it. Also, when we act, we only act in accordance to what is going to happen in the world. That's how we think. And so when Khadr tells Musa, you don't have the patience. I know things you don't know. Musa has a certain role. And part of that role is to enact justice. Well, justice based on what? Based on what human beings can understand and based on the human realm and human behavior. Allah's justice is not only in terms of this world, but in terms of the afterlife as well. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers. When Allah decrees His qadar for a person, Allah is also taking into account how that is going to affect their position in the afterlife. But when I raise my kids, I'm thinking about their world. I don't know what happens there, right? Now, obviously, I'm going to teach them the afterlife, right? But what I'm saying is when I'm managing their affairs, I'm managing their affairs based on how the world works. Because I can't see beyond that, all right? So Khadr is telling Musa, man, our knowledge in comparison to the knowledge of Allah is absolutely nothing. And therefore, we have to learn to let Allah do His thing. Let Him do His thing. And this is why, and one of the reasons why, Iman in Qada and Qadar is a rukun, it is a pillar of the faith. Because it is about learning to submit to Allah and let Him do His thing, allow Allah to do His thing. Right? فعمد الخضر إلى لوح من ألواح السفينة فنزعه فقال موسى قوم حملونا بغير نول عمدت إلى سفينتهم فخرقتها لتغرق أهلها قال ألم أقل إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال لا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا. فكانت الأولى من موسى نسيانا. So after this bird moment, Khadr goes and he rips, he pulls, he breaks a piece of the ship. It's a wooden ship, right? It's made of wood and nails. So he rips it. And Musa's sitting there watching this and what would you do? Right? Let's put ourselves in a real situation. You're on an airplane. You're on an airplane with this man. And he goes to the door of the airplane. I mean, this happened a few months ago, right? He just strolls onto the airplane, the door of the airplane, and just opens it. Well, how are you going to obviously what are you doing? What are you doing? What's the rationale behind this? You see what I mean, that Allah knows things and He does things based on His knowledge. We function within the known. Right? We function within the known. And so obviously Musa's reaction is expected. What are you doing? And not only is the action bizarre, to make matters even more concerning to Musa, is that they let you on this ship for free. Like, they're your friends. And not only that, you're harming everybody on it. You put everybody in danger. We could all sink right now. And Khadr responds, says, Musa, didn't I tell you? You don't have the patience? And Musa said, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. I understand. Point taken. And the Prophet says, this first time Musa forgot. He forgot his agreement with Khadr, that I'll just listen, I'll be a student. فانطلق فإذا غلام يلعب مع الغلمان فأخذ الخضر برأسه من أعلاه فاقتلع رأسه بيده فقال موسى أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. Now you have the second incident. They're walking, they come by a kid. And Khadr takes the kid. I mean, the description is gruesome. Right? Khadr takes the kid by the head and pretty much rips his head off. Right? I mean, imagine you're watching this. There are so many points to explain, such as, okay, if the child needed to die, couldn't it have been less gruesome? Right? Yeah, like, did it have to be that way? Anyway, what we're doing here is we're bringing out the questions. Why? Because the ultimate point is Allah knows, and He told Khadr to do it that way. Right? And this is when we get into the idea that Allah knows how things play out. Well, maybe if the death of that child was less gruesome, it would not have had the same impact that Allah wanted. We can theory craft, right? We might be right, we might be wrong, we might be partially right and partially wrong, but the idea is, the main point here is, when it comes to Allah's knowledge, the amount of knowledge we have is laughable. It actually becomes laughable for us to even question Allah. Right? So Musa, of course, he interjects and says, you killed a child that has done no wrong. And Khadr says, Musa, he says it more sternly this time, Musa, did I not tell you you don't have the patience? فانطلقا, they go next. حتى إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما أهلها فأبوا أن يضيفوهما فوجد فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأقامه قال الخضر بيده فأقامه فقال موسى لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا قال هذا فراق بيني وبينك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يرحم الله موسى لوددنا لو صبر حتى يقص علينا من أمرهما. So they go to the third moment. They enter a village. Now, back in the day, as you probably know, when you are a foreigner traveling and you enter into a village, it was common courtesy that village hosts you. Right? You're a traveler. It's not like today where there are gas stations and Targets and Walmarts everywhere. You're traveling, you need to resupply. So it was common courtesy to host travelers, guests, people who are just passing by. But every now and then, people come across a village that's very stingy. Right? They don't have the etiquettes. This happens to be one of them. So they go around asking who will host us, nobody hosts them. فَأَبَوْا أَن يُضَيِّفُوهُمَا. Nobody wanted to host them. So these people are like the worst. It's bad. And then they pass by, Musa and Khadr pass by a wall that's leaning over. It's about to fall. It's about to collapse. So Khadr does something, right, and the wall just erects. It goes back up. And Musa said, if you wanted to, you could have gotten money for that. Like you provided a service. The people needed this wall to be erected. You could have told them, I will erect it for you for a fee, for a charge. Nothing wrong with that. We can use that for food, right? So at that point, Khadr says, Musa, we depart now. Right? This third strike, you're out. We depart now. And then the Prophet comments on this and says, may Allah have mercy on Musa. We really wished he would have been patient, so we learned more. So we learned more. Now, there are a lot of lessons in this story. The idea here, the main point that the author, Bukhari, wants us to take away from this is that when qualifications involving Iman and knowledge of Islam or belief come in, we never assert that so-and-so or somebody is the most knowledgeable or has good taqwa. Rather, we take that back to Allah. We say Allah knows best about the state of this individual. And not to take more time, there are a lot of lessons from this story, but you can go back to the series we did about, you know what, that episode may not have been recorded, or the sound didn't record. Anyway, if it's there on YouTube, then alhamdulillah. If not, maybe another time we can look into the particular wisdoms of each. Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.